Welcome to Pivotal Slice. We're just talking about how to start the episode because we're not sure. So you've walked in at a moment of development.
It's nice to keep it fresh, you know. It's like when how am I doing my intros to my music? It's like, oh well, I've done piano and a lot in my previous releases up until now. I'm working on a fresh batch of tracks, so I'm thinking about how to challenge and change the habits in which I have become accustomed to.
It's all about the angle, isn't it? I find that if I'm writing a short story, I just need to find that angle and allow that first line to come to me, out of my subconscious. I don't really strain to get to it. I just allow it to kind of float up. And once I've got that first sentence, it's like, yeah, okay, that's the angle I'm in, and then I can pick up the flow from there.
Interesting. Yeah, I tend to break my process up now into stages, and I've just done 6 months of prep. Not a whole 6 months of prep. I've been working on other big projects, but I'll be improvising and creating ideas and little folders and stuff. So now I'm about to embark on the next phase, which is to put them into pieces, to take these modular parts and then combine them together. So I'll think about that and see how I can take that starting with a fresh angle into that part of the process. I like that.
Yeah, it's all just about allowing your subconscious to do the work. You've just got to be open to receiving those ideas.
Right. Indeed. So that kind of leads quite well, doesn't it, into our interview today that you performed with Melissa, right?
Oh, performed. I like that. Conducted, maybe.
Yeah, collaborated, explored.
Yeah, it was really nice to sit down with Melissa, sit down over Zoom, and just have a really open chat with her about her life and her career path into music, which can be quite a disempowering industry, can't it? I think, to break into. It requires a lot of hope, a lot of perseverance, and she kind of exudes that. So it should be a really inspiring chat for you all to listen to.
Fantastic. I'm excited. And at the end of the show, I'm also going to be breaking up the sections of the show with Bliss and Shadow, which is a brand new release for me. Super excited about it, super proud of it, and we will play the piece in its full form at the end. I'll talk a little bit about it before we play it, but that's to come as well.
Juicy episode.
Juice. Let us drink the glass of deliciousness.
Yeah.
Melissa James is a singer-songwriter based in London, using music as a channel for healing and personal discovery. She has released 2 albums and organised numerous events to raise money for charities and causes close to her heart. She is the creator of Stronger on Sundays, conversations with compassion on racial and social justice in a music-filled space.
Okay, I want to start with quite a broad question. I just want to know what music means to you and what purpose it serves in your life.
Um, well, I mean, at the sort of simplest level, um, it's it's just something that's kind of always been in me. Um, I've although I didn't I grew up in a family that kind of didn't encourage making music. My family loves music, and my dad was always playing records and things, and music is a big part of just going out and the social aspect of connecting with people, especially my parents being both from St Kitts in the West Indies. Music is a really big part of the culture. Um, but nonetheless, they also understood that, it's hard to live if you're not making money, and music is not a great way of doing that. So it's kind of this strange thing going on, which I guess is quite common for a number of people, is that you appreciate music. And for me, for my dad, was like music lived through him. He loved music, but at the same time, there was this kind of seediness about it in terms of, especially playing in clubs and things. That's, it just doesn't seem like the proper thing to do. So there's kind of some sort of, almost secrecy or shame around that to some extent. So I've kind of, definitely my relationship with music has changed over years, from being kind of something that I just enjoyed, sometimes by myself as a child, in terms of me making music, me singing around the house would be something I mostly did when nobody else was there, because it was like my secret thing and I wasn't really supposed to be singing. To becoming older and embracing it more, and going to university, not studying music because that was not the thing to do, but yet becoming more entwined at the same time with a musical crowd, which definitely got me started with performing, and then sort of really opening myself up to all sort of different styles and types of music through my friends and people that I knew at university. But it's such a long, the path has been so long to kind of both my appreciation of it in terms of listening to music that other people have made, and then my own relationship with becoming a creator, and more involved creatively with the music making process. So sorry, it's hard to kind of give a simple answer, because it's kind of complex. It's not like I can just kind of say, oh, music has just been through me all the way along, and I've just always loved it and really expressed it and always made music. And because there's just been such a kind of clandestine secrecy around it, shrouded in, as I say, shame and not wanting to use my voice because it doesn't feel like a proper job to have. But at the same time, that was always in me. And actually it got to a point where I realized much later on that I couldn't not make music, because it's a bit like, it would be a bit like, I don't know, trying to change your eye color or something. Like it was just a part of, it just is a part of who I am, and to not be able to express that was actually making me ill. So I'm sort of, it's taken a long time to get to that point where I'm just like, actually I have to make music. But I had quite an interesting thing recently where I was speaking to somebody about a project that I run, somebody in the music industry, and I said to him, I find myself more and more. Once upon a time, I thought I was just an artist, just somebody who was just making music. I mean, obviously, I know that music has healing potential and is powerful and a real positive thing for helping people, connecting people, all of those things. We all say a lot of that. But what I've found is that I've really been living into that more and more. And I said to him, I realized that I'm not just an artist kind of making music, but I feel like I'm using it as part of who I am and what I do to voice what I feel unhappy about, or, expressing it. I'm really realizing the power that music does have in cultivating and affecting change. And he said, well, music without purpose is beautiful, but music with purpose is powerful. And, and so now I kind of, I've repeated that quote so many times. I think it's such a brilliant.
Yeah, it's a great quote.
Yeah, I don't think he even realised, how powerful it was until he'd said it, and I was like, "That's great. I'm going to use that." But yeah, it really is. It's so I kind of I've got to a point where I'm less. I mean, definitely less afraid of using music. I'm still having to sort of toss away some of the old narratives that I grew up with to some extent sometimes, but almost somehow the knowing that music is more than just it can be frivolous and we can have fun, that's absolutely fine, but I think the more that I find, it doesn't matter what I do, every project I create or something I do involves me using the music as a way to create something, or as a way to speak about something, as a way to bring people together, as a way to help myself, to help others, and that sort of does give it a weight that kind of makes me feel that it's it really can contribute to something in a really powerful and effective way. So yeah, that's a very long answer, but
no, that's a great answer. No, I mean, I've spoken to so many artists who have a similar, limiting beliefs that have been kind of told to them as children, and this idea that you can't make a living out of doing this, and get a real job and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that the purpose that you find in it goes far beyond just making a living. Making a living is great as well, obviously, and getting money for what you do is great, but yeah, that sense of connecting with others, healing, and just making the world better with what you're doing. It's
absolutely, which I kind of feel is what we're here to do, otherwise kind of, I spoke to somebody yesterday, I met somebody yesterday, there's a really nice guy, but I don't know if I've ever spoken to anybody, maybe I have, but I can't think of anybody else I've spoken to who has such a level of apathy. And actually, I think, it's one of those things where that level of apathy where you're not kind of that really engaged in what you're doing, you're just like, this for me is just a job. I just, I don't even, lots of people say that, but for him, it was almost more than that. It was just like, I can't even be bothered to fight the stuff that I don't like, I just come and I just do it. I just get on with it, even though I know that it's wrong and it riles me up. I'm just like, but I just want to, and that kind of seems a shame, because there's so much that we can do, even on a tiny scale, Yeah.
Yeah. What a waste of a life to just be kind of going through the motions and not ever feeling alive. I mean, yeah, I've been in places like that before where I've been doing, you know, jobs that I hated and not really living, and it's just so sad.
It is. Yeah. Yeah,
So
it
much
is.
more to life.
Yeah, totally. So,
So did you also have to kind of take jobs on that maybe weren't so linked to your passion for music, you know, before you made a career out of it?
yeah, I mean, thankfully not very many. When I came out of university, I studied media studies at university. So when I came out, I went straight into, in fact, I was always working in the media in some capacity, even while I was studying, before I was studying, you know, once I kind of had imbibed the idea that music wasn't going to happen as a career for you, Melissa. So you got to think of something a bit better. My mum liked the idea of being in the media because she saw the BBC as being like this, you know, she recognised it. You can see it on television and it's glitzy. And she was just like, you know, you could get a job at the BBC, you know. So I came out of university having studied media studies and went straight into working at a magazine. And I was thinking about this actually before coming on the call. It was just that first proper job I had, because I'd had other jobs before in the summer and, you know, part-time jobs. Basically, I was always working whenever there was a holiday or a term break or something. But my first proper job out of university was at a magazine, and Country Homes and Interiors magazine. And it was so not me at all, really, to work for a magazine called Country Homes and Interiors. But nonetheless...
Well, your house looks beautiful there.
But, you know, it's a real, you know, I'm trying to think of a better phrase, but it is quite a hoity-toity magazine. I mean, I don't know what it's like now, but I imagine it's pretty much the same. It was great in terms of the actual role itself. It's quite unusual for somebody to come out of university straight into a job of that kind, earning pretty well. So I felt quite lucky, and obviously people sort of say, oh gosh, you're really lucky, you've got this great job. But the magazine editor was awful, like a bully. Essentially, she was in pain herself, and so she inflicted pain on others. And myself and one other person in particular, I think we were just easier targets. So we really got the thick end of a lot of her abuse. So I was there. I mean, everybody else generally was fine. I liked it in other ways, and potentially it could have been a great way, you know, if you are really wanting to work in the media, a brilliant way of learning about journalism and writing reviews and all those sorts of things. And I did do some of that, but she made my life hell for the 6 months that I was there. And so eventually I left. But after 6 months, although it was a difficult 6 months, and then decided I just needed to kind of leave quite quickly. It was quite a sudden decision one morning that actually I don't think I can go back in it again. So then just temped in via sort of media temping agencies and went straight into a job which was fantastic in another way, just temping at Capital Radio. And you know, it was just a rolling contract. I think it was supposed to be 2 weeks initially, but people were always on holiday and various people needed to be covered. So I kind of just ended up, and it was completely different from Country Homes, because it was, you know, fun and, you know, very young. Most of the people were more my age group. I mean, you know, Capital Radio is, whatever it is now, I'm sure is probably similar in a style, in a sense, to what it was then. Much more relaxed and easygoing, great to work with, and just what I needed at that time, given what I was coming from. But still, it wasn't really what I wanted to do. It was just a really good breathing space to have, having come out of that other job. But I ended up sort of working in various media roles for a while. Eventually did go to the BBC. Again, had a great time there. Not initially, actually, with another boss who was not a bully, but just quite hard going, quite difficult to work for, quite tense and, very serious. But then she left and somebody else took over who was also great to work with and more my age group, very inventive. And actually, I attribute what I did with him I really learned a lot from him about being creative in terms of publicity and promotion and thinking outside of the box, which is all very important when you're program making. I sort of moved around a bit in different guises in the media. But I began to know quite quickly that it wasn't really where I wanted to be. It was too fickle and it's odd, isn't it? You can sort of think that that's what you're after, this kind of role, which seems kind of glamorous and great. And I enjoyed it in many ways, but I realised that I didn't really care much for all the politics of media and the industry and how fickle it is and how the obsession with celebrity culture and how can we use such and such a celebrity to try to get attention of this story. I realised I really don't. I'm not into this actually. I then kind of began to move away from that. I was always making music on some level, though, more in terms of performing, doing the odd wedding gig or private gig somewhere at a weekend or something. And then I travelled for a bit and came back, had children, and then sort of began to think, okay, I do want to pursue music a bit more seriously. But when I began to work on making my first record, I worked somewhere which was fundamentally key to helping me gain the money to pay for the recording, but which was also, again, just soul destroying. It was for a property management company, and again, they were bullying and controlling and awful, and nobody there was happy working there. Most of them had been there for 15 years or over, though, and just kind of did it because it was easy. It was odd because on the one hand they were, and again everybody used to say, oh, gosh, you're so lucky, you've got this perfect job, because my children were very young at the time. They were quite good at enabling me to take my children to school, because the whole childcare thing is a nightmare if you have to try and find childminders who can do that for you. Not only is it expensive, but it's really difficult to get a childminder because just because of how it all works, it's really hard. So thankfully this company enabled me to take my children to school and then immediately after come to work 6 hours, not every day, sort of 3 days a week, or I could adjust the hours to fit whatever I had going on at the time. And they knew I was an artist or trying to make a record, trying to release it. So I'd finish work and then go and pick them up from school. So it all fit in. And people used to be like, gosh, I'd love a job like that. It was just, it was, in that sense, it was brilliant. But they were awful. It was soul destroying. And it was highly immoral, nothing illegal, but it was an eye-opener because they just owned loads of properties and they made loads of money out of charging people lots of ground rent, And there was nothing illegal about it, but it was just based on old laws that still play out. And because most people aren't familiar with the laws and legalities of home ownership, when you buy something that is, what's the word, leasehold, they could just take advantage. So I found that really hard because it went against so many aspects of what I believed. And I'd get letters from people, saying, oh gosh, I don't know how I'm going to pay these fees that they literally were just making up. And yet they owned hundreds of properties, were doing really well for themselves financially, and just, it was awful. But it made my album, and that's not to say that it was worth it in terms of the suffering that, I was typing letters. So I wasn't writing the letters, but I was typing the letters that were given to me that were dictated to me to send out. And I just remember kind of getting one from a woman who clearly was really struggling, and just sort of saying that she was going to have to pay £5, some ridiculous amount, £5 a week, to try to finish paying this debt that they were putting on her. And just feeling, I just can't do this anymore. There's just no way. And also it was starting to weigh on me, just the heaviness of working with people who were very controlling, and it made me suffer, mentally. So I left. But yeah, I don't know. I just, sometimes we have to do these things, and what they teach us is more clearly who we are. Yeah. Because in all the jobs I've done where there's been this level of injustice playing out, and what I was thinking about earlier is that most of the jobs that I've had to do have had that at some level. And so every time I've done it, what it's shown me is I can't do this. Like, I can't live, I can't work in these jobs where people treat each other badly, and it's just supposed to be accepted. But it better informs who I am. It definitely, comes into who I am as a musician and what I do as an artist, and informs how I've become the activist that I am, because I'm wanting to try to do my part in shaping the world and make it more equitable. And that fieriness comes from everything that I've experienced in the past. So I think it's important to remember those things when, because I think a lot of us are working in industries or in roles, if we're not working for ourselves necessarily, working for people who are taking advantage of us in some way. And maybe that's a hard thing to deal with, but sometimes I think for me, well, there's a lesson here for me to be learned somewhere. And once I've learned it, I need to take it forward into something else that I'm doing. So yeah, it's never been, plain sailing all the way. But we have to have these hardships.
If it was plain sailing, then you wouldn't be who you are, and you wouldn't be doing the work that you're doing now. So,
right,
like you said, it kind of fires you up. It really, inspires those passions that you then take forward into serving your true self. If you're doing your creative work. Yeah,
definitely.
Inspiring. You're kind of given what you need at the time, aren't you?
You are.
To have that stepping stone forward.
Totally. Yeah, you are. Very much so. Yeah, and it's sometimes hard to reckon with. Certainly for me it was, sort of thinking, gosh, but, I made my album, basically. A lot of the money came from this awful job. But I really believe that. I believe that we come to the things that we do for good reason, whatever that is, and we might not always see what that reason is at the time. But I've been thinking recently, kind of sort of similar, not exactly the same thing, but sort of a side issue. I've been thinking of signing up with Patreon, because I love the idea of this online community where you're directly in contact with those people who follow what you do and want to aid you, want to help you and support you in building it. And it feels better for me than like the crowdfunding model. Although it is it's not quite crowdfunding, but I guess it could be used in that way. I don't know. I just think it's a great thing. And I certainly know of musicians who, during the time when we were locked down, it was their Patreon community that kind of brought in a bit of something, even if it wasn't very much. So it's a brilliant model, and the artists that I've watched who've used it really well have really used it very well, especially as an independent artist. But what I don't like about it is when you look through all the reviews of it, they're awful. I mean, they're just, largely so many complaints. And then a lot of, more darker things, like people criticising the fact that they've complained about things that they think just don't look quite right. Maybe it's not quite clear, but is there something seedy going on here in terms of the accounts that are created and what people are doing? And so that made me really think, oh gosh, maybe I don't want to be part of it, because I don't know if I want to get engaged in something like that. But on the other hand, Facebook and all the, I probably shouldn't say that. They're all doing something, or even if it's not, not to accuse the organisation itself, maybe, but, there are creators using these things, perhaps not in the best light, or not for the light, in dark ways. And so for a long time, I was just like, no, I'm not doing Patreon. I think I'm just going to switch off from that idea and try and find something else. But then I really follow as much as I can my own gut and intuition. And the feeling I got recently was actually sometimes you need to bring light to a situation, and that's why you do it. So even if you don't feel like it's a good, you're not in agreement with some of the things that you think might be happening on there and things that other people are doing, which is true in life, isn't it? I mean,
sure.
We'll walk in the street and cross paths with all sorts of people who might have done all sorts of things that we won't agree with. But you, in your way, what you're doing brings a level of light to it. And so having that understanding made me feel really differently, actually, I kind of feel like even the organisation that I was working at, which, took me a long time to reckon with, because all I was thinking was this album came out of that, not entirely, but a large amount of it. But actually, for the time that I was there, I brought an energy that needed to be in that space. And you don't know what effect that might be having on some level on other people who are there. So I think, having that broader perspective, which we can't always see, is really important.
And think about all the people that are helped by the music that you created, music that you put out there on that first album. The effect of that on the world is huge, and you living truthfully and kind of doing what you're meant to do is huge. Like, that impact is just immeasurable, and on your children as well, because working a job that you hate and then coming home to your kids, they can sense that on you, can't they? So I'm sure that they get a lot out of you doing what you're meant to be doing as well.
Totally. And I hope maybe it taught them something, because they were quite young when I left. I think they were kind of, gosh, it's hard to imagine now. This was a while ago, but I think they were kind of like 7 and, 10 or something. Or maybe a little bit younger than that. And I just remember I was so fired up by the fact that I'd finally left, but I'd been working with this company that was just awful in terms of how they not only treated their staff, but also treated the people who owned properties, and who they had to connect with regarding ground rents and things. And so I said to them, you absolutely never, as far as you can, you always stand up for yourself. You don't let anybody push you around. You know your worth. And I just remember them being really tiny and just like, what is she on about?
Maybe they'll remember that when they're older.
Giving them this really hardcore lesson in their life.
It'll sink in anyway, and it'll be floating around there in their subconscious probably.
I hope so. I mean, it took me, it takes what it takes for you to learn it. But I thought, if you can learn this now,
First album that you made then, I mean, I know that healing and, using music as a way of kind of expressing trauma or, healing from difficult things is such a big part of your brand. So was that there right at the beginning with that first album, or did it take a while to develop that?
No, not at all. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I kind of just felt like I was an artist. I was just happy just to, I mean, I didn't really know what that meant, to be honest. I knew that the album was important for me. I knew I had to make that album, and all the songs that are on that are the ones that I needed to write and record. Those were stories that I needed to tell because they just came. I didn't do very much to bring them out of me. They were there in the wings. But yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything else at that point other than that I need to tell these stories. I need to sing these songs. I need to use my voice. And it felt very important for me to do so, given the messages I'd grown up with about not doing that. So that was really my only focus at that point. But essentially what happened was, I mean, as is the case, I suppose, in a number of situations, there were a culmination of things that kind of came together. So I was finding it really difficult as a new artist, having released this first record, to get taken seriously. And it is anyway, but especially when you're kind of a real newbie trying to get gigs booked, contact venues, and it was the same story. Oh, you have to send your CD. You send your CD, and follow up 2 weeks later. Oh, we've not listened to it yet. Okay, that's fine. You've got it. I just want to know that. But you leave it a while. You follow up again, and then it's like, oh, I totally forgot about that. Now I've lost it. Can you send me another one? And that cycle happening, and then eventually you just kind of giving up because you don't really ever get a response, or it's actually, no, I don't think you're right for this venue because you've not got the level of followers that we want to be able to bring into this, whatever it might be. So it was a culmination of all of that. And also, I remember quite clearly sort of Christmas 2012, leading up to Christmas 2012, December, being in my car, driving, turning on the radio, listening to an interview with a woman speaking about a charity she'd created called Small Steps Project. She herself had been a celebrity journalist, and she'd gone to Cambodia on holiday, decided to sort of go a bit off the beaten track, and then learned what was, the darker side to people really trying to live on a day-to-day level. And their way of doing that was having their children, young children, instead of going to school, they're foraging around on rubbish heaps, probably a lot of that rubbish having, come from here, come from us, foraging around, trying to find bits and pieces that they could sell in order that their families could make money. And they were doing this with bare feet, no shoes, So she created, off the back of that trip, Small Steps Project. And I just remember listening, and I still don't really, I've thought about this so many times. I think it was just a point where I was in my life, because it's not that I'd never been concerned about, the plights of others in the past, but there was something about listening at this point. I don't know, maybe I was being more attentive at that point. I who knows? But something at that point, I listened to this interview and I was just so moved. I was just like, oh my gosh, I've got to try to do something to help this charity. What can I do? And as soon as I got back home, I messaged them and said, I've just heard this interview with the person who started it. I don't know what I can do. I'm just an artist, but if there's anything I can do, then please let me know. It was just before Christmas though, so everybody was winding down. But during Christmas, this was still on my mind. What can I do? Maybe I can hold a concert at home and invite some friends to come round, ask everybody to contribute £10 or whatever they can give, and then send that money to the charity. It'll be whatever it is. It might not be a huge amount of money, but whatever it can be that I can do. And somehow that kind of evolved from that idea into, I just remember doing a gig at the Green Note, and Tom Robinson, who had always been a good supporter of my music, and who, as a result of a retreat that I'd attended with him, we'd co-written a song, and so he'd come to this gig to sing it with me. And at some point during the night, we were just chatting, and he said, Melissa, you need to organise your own gigs. You can put them on anywhere, put them on in a gallery. And suddenly, a bit later on, I was like, okay, yeah, maybe that's it. I could organise some gigs, put them on in a gallery, and the money from those gigs can go to this charity. Now, at this point, I'd never organised a thing. I mean, not even a party, not at home. I mean, nothing. So I had no idea what I was doing, but it just seemed, whereas I'd taken months and months before then of trying to get a gig in a venue and not really had that much success. I mean, the odd thing, yes, but not much. I took one afternoon, I called 3 art galleries in London, and within an hour, I had 3 gallery spaces booked where they said, yeah, come perform here. And for me, it was just like, okay, well, I get to do a gig that I want to do as well. So I get to perform. I get to perform my music. I don't think I was even thinking that much about an audience. I never organised anything, so I had no idea. But it just it ticks the boxes. I just thought, well, whoever comes, they'll pay to get in, and that money will go to the charity. And I would ask a couple of friends if they could come and perform as well for the charity, which they did. So unexpectedly, what I quickly realised was that it was a brilliant community project of giving and receiving. And now the model of giving and receiving is what I kind of live by with everything I create. It has to be serving everybody who's involved in it in a way that keeps it in balance. So I was receiving an audience who were coming to listen to, and that first concert, there were like 4 people. I mean, literally. It was just, and I remember turning up and going, oh my God, this is so horribly embarrassing. There are only 4 people here. Really, and it must have raised maybe £20 or something. But in another way, it was beautiful, because we were there, I was there performing my music. There was another artist who'd come, and she was performing. Having done the gigs that were organised subsequently, the next one was in Wimbledon, which is closer to home. And that had a bigger audience. I mean, it was a small space, but it had about 20, 25 people. I ended up meeting a man who was great philanthropist and business person who ended up being a great friend and mentor and still is. And he just said, this is a brilliant concept, Melissa, this gig in a gallery. It's great. You're performing, you've got other artists performing. What happens is you're sharing audiences. So people who are coming to see me are learning about another artist. People who are coming to see them are learning about my music. It was a community project. I'd go to all the estate agents in the area and say, when you're flyering, because at that time, I mean, they still do actually, don't they? But at that time, they definitely were still flyering, putting their leaflets through people's houses. Well, I said, well, at the same time, could you put the flyer through the door for the advertising the gig? Which, because it's in the local area, means that people are more likely to come. It was supporting the gallery, because people who might not have come to the gallery were coming to the gallery, and not just people locally, but people who might have been travelling from a bit further. The gallery was showcasing their artwork. Everybody was helping this charity and getting to know about what the work of the charity was. So all these things that I hadn't thought of. When I realised and kind of really got underway with it a bit more, I just thought, oh, this is a brilliant project. It's a really great idea. So yeah, I mean, that was just a great thing to do. And I did, I think, 5 or 6 of those. One of them happened in Paris as well, because I had lived there. So I thought, oh, I can go to Paris and do one. And it was just, again, that was a beautiful concert, really, really nicely done. So yeah, it was just a brilliant project. And it was never like I thought, okay, well, I've done that as a fundraising activity and I did that for charity, so I have to now find something else charitable to do. No, there was just, there's lots wrong. I mean, there are a lot of great things in our world, but there are a lot of things that aren't right. There are a lot of injustices. There are a lot of people who are suffering. There are a lot of people who are misrepresented, unfairly treated. So you don't have to look hard to see where, and even for us as individuals in our more privileged way of being here, people are suffering. And so again, with the second album, when I recorded it, and that really only came about because I wanted to do a much bigger project. I was having difficulty getting the funding to do that. So in the end, it was like, right, I'll just do a stripped back version of songs, make it much cheaper and easier to record them. And it will be really nice to have that intimate feel on the record. But what came from that was me developing a clearer understanding of what the songs that I had written, these lyrics, were saying to me about myself. And so one thing after another, it led to me inviting people to sing, people who were part of a singing group I was running, to come and sing one particular song with me at the launch of that record, and me just having visions immediately that this song could be used to bring people together who have some understanding of mental ill health. But I never expected it to be anything more than just that one pop-up. But eventually it's like, okay, well, we'll record the song as a big thing as well. And now the project is still, I mean, I'm still thinking today of arranging something else that I might do with that. So I think I've got to a point now where I realise actually that everything pretty much that I do, without necessarily seeking it, there's always a cause somehow behind it. And I come back to that quote from that man that I was speaking with. I think, yeah, music without purpose is beautiful. Music is beautiful, but when there's a purpose, it's just so powerful. And feeling that, yeah, that's a good thing. I'm happy in that space.
Yeah, and it's so empowering as well because, like you said, you weren't necessarily seeking all of these different projects. They just kind of came to you because you were open to finding them and, discovering more about yourself in the process as well. And also, rather than like waiting around for someone to give you a gig, taking the reins and saying, right, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to call up galleries and getting a gig. And it's amazing, isn't it? Because I think there are a lot of disempowering systems in place in the arts. So I think as an artist, it is really empowering to just take charge like that and create your own communities and projects.
Yeah, completely. And while Gig in a Gallery hasn't done anything for a while, the last thing actually was after I did the Big Sing recording of Live Again in 2016. Is that right? 2006, summer of 2016. I mean, it was a brilliant weekend because the whole weekend was recording that song with this wonderful group of people who came and offered their voices, just people who had responded to the advert or responded to the request from friends of friends. But once we finished that recording, I also had a gig in a gallery event planned for a different charity on the Monday afterwards. And again, it was a great gig at a really lovely art gallery space, a beautiful space. And they were really supportive of it. They helped to sell the tickets. The artist who came along and two other artists or three other artists came along and were involved with it. They, it was just the power of bringing things together in that way, and and I don't know, I just always think of that giving and receiving model, like it can't just be a vanity project. That, I mean, I think it's fine that I get something from it, and actually I wouldn't think it was okay if I didn't. I think that giving and receiving has to be in balance, whatever it is that you get, whether it's that I get the fulfillment of knowing that I'm creating this, or whether it's that I get a new audience, or I sell CDs, or whatever it might be. But everybody has to gain, and when it's done from, I always say, when you start from a heart space with anything you do, then it's going to benefit everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's been really great to do it, and at some point I certainly I haven't kind of buried it entirely. I'd love to be able to do them again at some point. Yeah.
So have you been doing any live stuff since the pandemic, or has it been more online kind of thing, the projects that you're doing now?
Well, obviously a lot of stuff was online when we were all locked down. My first gig out of lockdown was brilliant as part of Ride Jazz Festival, supporting Gabrielle at that festival, which was an amazing thing to do. Not only supporting her, but also just, it was a gig by the sea. I mean, I was just like, oh, this is amazing. The day was wonderful in terms of the weather, and just a first performance, having not performed in such a long time, was, I can't tell you, it was just amazing. So yeah, no, that was great. But I'm kind of, I don't know, I mean, definitely in terms of Sing for Sane, the big Sing project, I keep thinking every so often, maybe that's done its thing now. Maybe it needs to be laid to bed. But it feels to be re-emerging again. I've just had other ideas that I really want to begin to explore, which are to take the project to different groups, and then bring people together in a big Sing performance at a wonderful venue, which I won't say what it is at the moment, just in case, because it's still it's just an early seed that's been planted. But if that happens, it'll just be amazing to have like hundreds of people singing together potentially.
Wow.
So I'm working on that, and then sort of just thinking about other gigs. Really, it's been such an odd time. I know a lot of artists have sort of got back into the swing much more easily, and I sort of feel like I'm not quite sure where I am yet, and definitely desperate to be back performing and also wanting to record, but also sort of still walking on the waves a little bit and trying to just see how I land and where I do, and creating in other ways. Lockdown was great for me, just in terms of writing in songs. Definitely, I'm pushing myself to play in a way that I never had before, which was good too. but also just more creative writing, and poems and more autobiographical writing. So I've been creative in other ways, and sometimes I sort of think, oh gosh, but what about my music? But I mean, it's there, and I'm just allowing myself to, I think, it's to explore and not feel like I have to be trapped into just doing one thing. But I do definitely want to be back performing again. So I'm sort of making plans for things that I can do, both as as the artist in terms of the Melissa James artist, but also in the wider sense of other things that I do. And of course, during lockdown, I created another cause, Stronger on Sundays, off the back of George Floyd's murder, which actually I didn't create it specifically for that initially. Stronger on Sundays was really just supposed to be like a community, an online community space to connect people who were isolated when we were locked down. The idea was to bring in people I knew who were meditation teachers, mindfulness practitioners, yoga teachers, whatever it was that was their discipline, and invite them to come and share their wisdom of how we can strengthen ourselves during this challenging period where we're not in physical contact with each other. And I started that in April and did 3 sessions before George Floyd was murdered. And I then just thought, it doesn't feel right that I just carry on talking about how we can get through this time when I know that all of this other stuff is really ripe and is happening, and had stirred something in me which made me want to learn more and voice more and speak more and inform myself more and inform others. So it quickly turned its attention, or I turned my focus for the program towards using it as a space to bring again music, my music, other artists with their music, but also conversations around injustice in a deep way, not just a surface level way.
Great job. Thank you, Jade, for conducting that space of sharing, and very interesting.
Yeah, well, thank you to Melissa for coming on the show and sharing her work. I think, it's an inspiring journey for any musician, any artist. It's got that whole empowerment, liberation thing that we're such fans of on this podcast.
Yeah, it's just really refreshing to be connecting with people that are on the same page with sort of raising awareness of social issues. It's just really inspiring to hear about all of the work that she does.
And using healing, knowing yourself deeply, I think is a big part of her whole brand. So yeah, it's definitely same vibe.
Yeah, it's that authenticity tip which we're always coming back again and again to, which is just so key, isn't it, for true artistic expression to thrive.
Definitely. So let's have some music, shall we?
Yeah, so brand new piece, Bliss and Shadow from me, and I wanted to explore the contrast of opposing, polarizing emotions and feelings, and I think that that's a big part of the music that I'm doing. I'm realizing that a friend of mine said I played her something that I considered to be really upbeat and had this sort of childlike wonder to it and very light, I thought. And she said her description of it was, which is super fascinating. She was like, it made me uncomfortable and a bit scared. It sounded like the sheep were in the field, but the wolf was lurking in the shadows in the forest.
That's a great analogy.
It's so good, isn't it? I love it. I fucking love that. That just sort of broadened my understanding, and I think what it did was it made me realise that there's no distinction between light and dark in my mind. Like, I'm not able to see one as independent from the other.
They have to exist with each other, don't they?
Exactly.
Can't have one without the other.
Yes, totally. There's a bit of dark in everything light, and there's something light in everything dark. So so that's kind of the theme of the piece. I'm playing with those contrasts of ideas. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it, and please connect with me online. David Mackenzie, composer. Mackenzie spelled Mackenzie. Check out Jade's work. Jade Green Creative. Orange's Journal.
Yep, follow us on all the channels, and you can subscribe to our Patreon as well, where we're releasing fresh content, fresh episodes, all about different creative things, blockages, rejection, things like that. So yeah, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, please come and join us and donate financially to our mission, our cause, our brand.
Help us get some new equipment.
Yeah, and grow our marketing and just grow. The part of growth is financial. So if you're able to help out with that, we would be greatly appreciative of that. And please do check out Melissa and her channels.
Yeah, I'll put all of those links in the description as well. You can buy her work on Bandcamp. So yeah, please do that. Support artists. It's really, really vital. And energetically, helps us to grow and flourish.
Man, it feels so good when someone buys something, right? Especially from Bandcamp.
Especially with music, it's like no one buys it anymore, do they? So, it's a huge thing.
You get a personalised email from Bandcamp when you make a sale, and it tells you like the email address of the person who bought it and how much they spent on it. You can choose to spend more on you get to choose. There's a minimum, but you can pay more if you want, and it gives you such a buzz, man. Like, it is amazing. Like that small act of doing that can like just energize that artist and make them feel so happy. So it is a powerful thing to do, and it's a really good platform. So yeah, I think that's the end of the show. Please enjoy further shows.
Yeah,
coming
subscribe.
your way. Subscribe.
Tell your friends.
Indeed. And just massive love going out to you. Thank you so much. Continue to be yourself and to state your needs and to...
You are enough.
Yes, you are enough.
you.